I'm Paul Challenger. And today I'll be talking about Arthur Conan Doyle's book, The Land of Mist. It's a novel written in the mid-1920s and is the third book in the series where the central character is Professor Challenger. I was nicknamed Prof in school, but didn't realise why. I certainly wasn't displaying any overt intelligence in school, and I don't think I do now either. Well, here's a clip of Professor Challenger in action. I'm sure you'll enjoy this. That's amazing, isn't it? You can even hear people. Don't think I've got any volume. Wrong button. That's amazing, isn't it? You can even hear people in the audience coughing. That's a pirate video. I pirated that from the cinema. They do reruns every now and again. I don't think so. So that was the 1925 trailer for the first movie, The Lost World. You may have seen one of the subsequent remakes. I think they might have done it a lot better with modern CGI. So that's the famed book in the series introducing Professor Challenger. But few know about Arthur Conan Doyle's novel, The Land of Mist. In this novel, Professor Challenger takes a back seat, and the story centres on others, introduced in the Lost World book, who team up with Professor Challenger's daughter Enid and the journalist Malone. I think he was featured in that clip. Together, these two visit every form of psychic or spiritualist seance that they can attend as part of reporting their findings for articles in Malone's newspaper. And in this way, we the readers are introduced to all the knowledge on the subject that Arthur Conan Doyle had acquired to that point. Arthur Conan Doyle, or rather Arthur Doyle, when he speaks in modern seances through direct voice, discovered spiritualism after his son and brother had been killed in the First World War, and he had been given such conclusive evidence of survival that he became a staunch spiritualist thereafter, whilst remaining also a Christian. And this novel effectively records his journey of evidence from basic to very advanced, embracing all the good and bad, such as fraudulent practices of the time, whilst showing interaction with the prevailing Christian religion of his day. There are some really interesting descriptions of seances from the period, and of skullduggery and other goings-on. I've only got the book on Kindle, so it's not easy to flick through the book, but we'll give a section of it a go to get a flavour. "They are funny sometimes," said Mr. Bolsover in reminiscent vein. "It is as well to keep on the right side of them." I think he's talking about spirit people. "They are not allowed to hurt humans, but we all do things we're not allowed to do, and they are very human themselves. You remember how the Times correspondent got his head cut open with the tambourine in one of the Davenport brothers' seances. Very wrong, of course, but it happened. No friend ever got his head cut open. There was another case down Stepney Way. A moneylender went to a seance. Some victim that he had driven to suicide got into the medium. He got the moneylender by the throat and was as close, and it was a close thing for his life. But I'm off, Mr. Malone. We sit once a week and have done for 4 years without a break. 8 o'clock Thursdays. Give us a day's notice, and I'll get Mr. Maley to meet you. He can answer questions better than I. Next Thursday? Very good." And Mr. Bolsover lurched out of the room. Both Malone and Enid Challenger had, perhaps, been more shaken by their short experience than they had admitted. But both were very sensible people who agreed that every possible natural cause should be exhausted, and very thoroughly exhausted, before the bounds of what is possible should be enlarged. Both of them had the utmost respect for the ponderous intellect of Challenger, and were affected by his strong views, though Malone was compelled to admit in the frequent arguments in which he was plunged that the opinion of a clever man who has no experience is really of less value than that of the man in the street who has actually been there. These arguments, as often as not, were with Mervyn, editor of the psychic paper Dawn, which dealt with every phase of the occult, from the lore of the Rosicrucians to the strange regions of the students of the Great Pyramid, or of those who uphold the Jewish origin of our blonde Anglo-Saxons. Mervyn was a small, eager man with a brain of a high order, which might have carried him to the most lucrative heights of his profession, had he not been determined to sacrifice worldly prospects in order to help what seemed to him to be a great truth. As Malone was eager for knowledge and Mervyn was equally keen to impart it, the waiters at the literary club found it no easy matter to get them away from the corner table in the window at which they were wont to lunch, looking down at the long grey curve of the embankment and the noble river with its vista of bridges. The pair would linger over their coffee, smoking cigarettes and discussing various sides of this most gigantic and absorbing subject, which seemed already to have disclosed new horizons to the mind of Malone. There was one warning given by Mervyn which aroused impatience, amounting almost to anger in Malone's mind. He had the hereditary Irish objection to coercion, and it seemed to him to be appearing once more in an insidious and particularly objectionable form. "You are going to one of Bolsover's family séances," said Mervyn. "They are, of course, well known among our people, though few have been actually admitted. So you may consider yourselves privileged. He has already taken a fancy to you. He thought I wrote fairly about them. Well, it wasn't much of an article, but still, among the dreary, purblind nonsense that assails us, it did show some traces of dignity and balance and sense of proportion." Malone waved a deprecating cigarette. Bolsover's séances and others like them are, of course, things of no moment to the real psychic. They are like the rude foundations of a building, which certainly help to sustain the edifice, but are forgotten once you come to inhabit it. It is the higher superstructure with which we have to do. You would think that the physical phenomena were the whole subject, those and a fringe of ghosts and haunted houses. If you were to believe the cheap papers who cater for the sensationalist, of course, these physical phenomena have a use of their own. They rivet the attention of the inquirer and encourage him to go further. Personally, having seen them all, I would not go across the road to see them again. But I would go across many roads to get high messages from the beyond. Yes, I quite appreciate the distinction, looking at it from your point of view. Personally, of course, I am equally agnostic as to the messages and the phenomena. Quite so. St. Paul was a good psychic. He makes the point so neatly that even his ignorant translators were unable to disguise the real occult messages, as they have succeeded in doing so in many cases. Can you quote it? I know my New Testament pretty well, but I am not letter perfect. It is the passage where he says that the gift of tongues, which was an obvious, sensational thing, was for the uninstructed, but that prophecies, that is real spiritual messages, were for the elect. In other words, that an experienced spiritualist has no need of phenomena. I'll look up the passage. You'll find it in Corinthians, I think. By the way, there must have been a pretty high average of intelligence amongst those old congregations, if Paul's letters could have been read aloud to them and thoroughly comprehended. That is generally admitted, is it not? Well, it is a concrete example of it. However, I am a downside track. What I wanted to say to you is that you must not take Bolsover's little spirit circus too seriously. It is honest as far as it goes, but it goes mighty short way. It's a disease, this phenomena hunting. I know some of our people, women mostly, who buzz around seance rooms continually, seeing the same thing over and over, sometimes real, sometimes, I fear, imitation. What better are they than as souls or as citizens or in any other way? No. When your foot is firm on the bottom rung, don't mark time on it, but step up to the next rung and get firm upon that. I quite get your point, but I'm still on the solid ground. Well, there we have it. A reading from the book. If you search for the book on the internet, the search will show that you can get sellers asking anything from small amounts, a couple of pounds, to well over £4,000, and that's just a quick search. But you can even find someone reading the whole book on YouTube. I'm pretty sure it said it was 9 hours 59 minutes. But you know, if you're running a marathon, that might be good entertainment. Kindle books are very reasonably priced, and they may even be free. I've downloaded all for minimal 50p charge maybe, or completely free, and you can't get better value than that. What have I downloaded? All Arthur Conan Doyle books, The Wanderings of a Spiritualist, The History of Spiritualism, that's if in paper form, that's 2 very large volumes. The New Revelation, The Edge of the Unknown, What is Spiritualism, and The Vital Message. I've actually got What is Spiritualism in German, Was ist Spirituismus. I'm not sure, but I think you can get a Kindle app for free. Download it on your laptop, computer, and then you're away. You can read Kindle PDF books. Now, Arthur Conan Doyle was an absolutely prolific writer. He qualified as a doctor and spent some time as a ship's surgeon before opening a practice in the south of England. Can't quite remember where, but I'm not sure if it wasn't Plymouth or Portsmouth or Eastbourne, something like that. Business was slow. That was all pre-National Health Service. I don't think you could find a doctor who would say that business was slow nowadays. And whilst he awaited paying patients, he had time to write and began writing about his time aboard ship. First story got published in a magazine, and the rest, as they say, is history. Many of his subsequent books started out in life as serializations in a magazine or newspaper. Here's a very interesting story I found. It's a blog, and it was put onto a blog site. The blog is by Zoe Luca Richards and Dr. Christine Ferguson, and the blog is dated from 28th of October 2022. Zoe is the creator of Modern Archives, and Dr. Ferguson is chair in English Studies, and they're both at Stirling University. And the blog is all about the discovery of a missing chapter from the manuscript to the book The Land of Mist, written by Arthur Conan Doyle in his very own handwriting. Let's take a little look at PowerPoint pictures now, showing the actual manuscript, which can be ascertained from particular libraries, all quoted in the blog. Look at the PowerPoint. So there's the actual page 1 of the manuscript, and it's got some little notation in the top corner there, which says you can't understand why it wasn't included in the book. There's another page, and that's page 8, possibly page 8. Now, if the other one wasn't page 8, then that one there is definitely page 8, which features in the blog. So there's Arthur writing at his desk, possibly at home now, but as I say, started in his surgery. Looks quite young there, doesn't he? Later life, common photograph of Arthur Conan Doyle. There's no way of knowing whether the face in the so-called ectoplasm behind him is real, is true, or if it's a representation of, maybe what ectoplasm faces therein look like, or whether that is, which a lot of people would say, that's just pure a trick of photography, camera trick. Because, in the early days of photography, people believed that the camera never lied. But of course, it does. Well, more so as the people behind the camera can cause a trick effect. This is a good one here. Look, picture of Arthur Conan Doyle. And there's a poster there for a play that was written from Arthur Conan Doyle's correspondence with a Mr. Edalji, who got in touch with Arthur Conan Doyle to say, "I'm being framed, I'm innocent, help me, Arthur, help me get myself out of this mess." And so the play is all about the story that unfolded on the correspondence and legal case of Mr. Edalji. We saw the play in Nottingham en route to Middlesbrough. See our family in Middlesbrough one trip. Very interesting. And a fabulous playhouse in Nottingham as well. I'd highly recommend. Here I am, back again. The wonders of ODS Studio. So as many people will know, these book readings are actually me practicing for working on ODS Studio on behalf of Britain's Hidden History. And I was surprised to find in that reading from the Land of Mist, Arthur quoting that people actually thought that one branch of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, Jewish, Israeli lost tribes, actually were the Anglo-Saxons. And there is a book that I've read that the guy postulated in the book that the word Saxon derived from Isaac's sons. So it's Isaac's sons being the rearguard tribe of the migrating 10 lost tribes, who all came to Britain. Half of them came to Britain, half of them remained in Croatia, which is Switzerland, and also the bulk of them in Etrusca, which became Tuscany. So the rearguard ended up walking through Europe and ended up in Britain eventually as the Saxons. Isaac's sons, Saxons. Arthur Conan Doyle pointing it out. May edit this part of it out of the final video, but I'm just putting it in to say what I'm doing. The live shows are on Britain's Hidden History Sunday evenings, where they live or reruns of our dearly departed friend Ross. He did so many shows, 125, and unfortunately 125 show was the show where his aorta aneurysm started to take effect and bleed. So I've taken over in a loose capacity, running the live shows, and this is my practice for those. Let's go back to the narrative now then. So let me read now for a transcript of the blog that I was referring to, and it's called The Darker Side, an unpublished Arthur Conan Doyle chapter acquired by the British Library. In 2019, the British Library acquired a rather remarkable piece of Arthur Conan Doyle history, an unpublished chapter from his final Professor Challenger novel, The Land of Mist. The Lost chapter, as it was dubbed, comprises 9 pages in Conan Doyle's hand and is titled Chapter 13, Roman numerals, The Darker Side. You'll find that in MS 89427, which I think is a click-on link to the where the document is archived. Previously, the chapter is believed to have remained in the possession of Doyle's family until the death of his eldest son, Dennis Conan Doyle, in 1955, whereupon the manuscript was auctioned in New York in 1955. As on November the 22nd, and then again in March 1966. The manuscript was sent to auction in 2019 by the Meisei Iwaki University in Japan, and it was subsequently purchased by the British Library and is now available to be consulted by researchers. MS 89427. For those who are that way inclined. The Land of Mist deals heavily with both spiritualism, a movement and belief in which Conan Doyle had become active following the death of his son and brother in World War I, and Christianity, the faith in which he had been raised. It follows several of the characters from Conan Doyle's earlier Professor Challenger novels, The Lost World being one of them, as they investigate the spirit world. At first largely skeptical, approaching with purely professional interest, they soon become enthralled by the individuals they encounter and their otherworldly experiences. Conan Doyle drafted the narrative over a few months between late 1924 and early 1925. It appeared in The Strand magazine from July 1925 to March 1926, before publication by Hutchinson & Co. in 1926. This draft chapter, Chapter 13, which contains numerous corrections and additions throughout, is believed to have been written whilst Conan Doyle was travelling in Switzerland. Conan Doyle's close association with the country is well documented, and it is believed several other chapters from Land of Mist were also drafted there. Now, Professor Christine Ferguson, who's chair in English Studies at the University of Stirling, is currently working on a new scholarly edition, that's a hard word, isn't it? Scholarly edition of The Land of Mist, due for publication in 2024. Nearly lost a century then. Ferguson's research focuses on 19th and 20th century British literature, and in particular on the impact of occult beliefs and new religious movements on the popular fiction of those periods. During the course of her research into The Land of Mist, she has looked closely at the lost chapter and its significance to the rest of the novel, as well as its broader significance to Arthur Conan Doyle's work and personal beliefs. She notes the chapter. The darker side arguably represents the most sensational and prurient. Now that's a word for a chair of English Studies, is it not? The darker side arguably represents the most sensational and prurient episode within The Land of Mist, detailing the seduction and financial entrapment of a young Frenchman named Lapé by a beautiful spirit named Sylvia, who demands that he pay increasingly large sums of money to advertise her name in the French press. If he does not, she threatens, he will soon die. Alongside the chapter, it was originally intended to precede, and the chapter would have been There Are Heights and Depths. Ferguson continues, it seems to have been designed to dramatise the distinction between the pious British spiritualists for whom Doyle had, in the 1920s, become a figurehead, and the more scientifically aligned psychical researchers who worked in Europe, while the former, represented by the high-minded Christian spiritualist Algernon Maley, character in the book, are given purely religious motivations for exploring the other world. The latter are presented as agnostic materialists, disinterested in the moral aspects of the question. Ever the patriot, Doyle presents only pure-hearted British spiritualism as proof and protection against the type of metaphysical threat posed by Sylvia and her ilk. Unless you get the religious bearing of this thing, Maley insists, it is always a danger. And that's a quote from the book. There's one of those pages that we saw in the PowerPoint presentation in Conan Doyle's handwriting says, "This chapter was lost in some strange way and never appeared in the book." So Ferguson continues, "A small note believed to be in Conan Doyle's hand at the top of folio 1 states that this chapter was lost in some strange way and never appeared in the book." So I read it and Ferguson quoted it. "It seems that Doyle had intended for the chapter to be included. Although the chapter is labelled Chapter 13, Professor Ferguson believes the chapter should in fact be situated narratively between what were published as Chapter 11, where Silas Linden comes into his own, and Chapter 12, There Are Heights and There Are Depths. Like Doyle, we cannot be certain as to why the chapter was omitted. However, the subject matter that the chapter deals with is somewhat challenging, I like that word, in its nature, touching on issues of nationalism and gender politics." Christine Ferguson notes, "British nationalism is not the only ideological position or indeed form of bias on display in the chapter The Darker Side. The chapter also compounds the deep sexism embedded within the Land of Mist, most evident hitherto in the novel's sidelining of Enid Challenger, daughter of the Lost World's Professor George Edward Challenger, within its male conversion quest, while Professor Challenger, Edward Malone and Lord John Roxton test, explore, and ultimately push to achieve a fully rationalist form of spiritualist belief. Enid remains largely silent, seeming to automatically assent to the truth of spiritualism with no great struggle, and proving most, perhaps only ever, instrumental to the plot when channeling the words of dead men. One of the pages shown in the PowerPoint pictures of the handwritten draft of Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost Chapter reveals Conan Doyle's sexism with the character Maley's comments about Sylvia. That was page 8 that I mentioned. This chapter implies that there may be good reasons for limiting women's power, both in and beyond the seance room. When LaPaix asks Maley if Sylvia is a demon, the older man gestures to the Paris streets outside and says, "You'll find dozens of Sylvias there. You do not call them demons? No, I do not call her a demon, but the unchanged spirit of a woman, living or dead," he suggests. "Women are always already demonic, a threat to the men from whom they seek power." These powerfully misogynistic sentiments will render the darker side a key document for scholars of Doyle's gender politics for many years to come. And in the light of such controversial content, it might be tempting to view the omission of the dark side from the published version of The Land of Mist as deliberate, perhaps a last-minute retraction by a jittery publisher. But there is no evidence for doing so. On the contrary, it seems clear that both Doyle and Hutchinson and Co. fully intended it to appear for the first edition, which includes an appendix item about the chapter on a note on chapter 12. But the actual chapter itself, more likely the chapter... I didn't read that very well, did I? Let me read it again. On the contrary, it seems clear that both Doyle and Hutchinson and Co. fully intended it to appear in the first edition because of a note in the appendix. And the note was in chapter 12, but not the actual chapter 13 itself. More likely, the chapter simply fell victim to a slip in the proof and production process. There we are then. The acquisition of the chapter by the British Library will open its contents up to the broader research and offers both enthusiasts and scholars alike further material documenting Conan Doyle's own spiritualists' beliefs. And that blog was posted by Eleanor Dickens, who may have written or spoke the full blog. And that's fascinating, isn't it? Because I never took Arthur Conan Doyle to be misogynistic. I read the book myself, and I think I read. I picked up maybe on. On maybe the men doing all the proving and investigating and challenging the evidence that they're hearing. But Conan Doyle gave Enid the responsibility of becoming a medium. So he told the story of becoming a medium from Edward Challenger's daughter's perspective, from Enid's perspective. But, in that quick reading that I undertook from the book, there was a disparaging remark, if you remember, where the men who were talking in the coffee shop basically said that women went back and forth to seances all the time, and it was women he was being derisory about. Well, I think you find that there were plenty of men who went back and forth to seances all the time, looking at the physical phenomena that they witnessed. And that I did myself. That physical phenomena is profound. I went to the seances of a physical medium for about 2 years, not every week. I had the opportunity to go every week, but I was working. It was too much. I had a travelling job. So I went largely once a month, maybe twice a month sometimes. I went to witness the physical phenomena as much as to hear the spiritual philosophy. There's plenty of people who channeled spiritual philosophy. There's very, very few people who are able to demonstrate physical phenomena. I saw in physical phenomena the very first time in the blacked out seance with the medium that I visited. At some point they put the red light on close to the lady's feet, and the black of her dress, when the cabinet was opened, all you could see in the red light was her lower legs and her feet. And then the phenomena occurred, and the phenomena was that both her feet started flapping. Now, the right foot flapped to such a rate that it was barely visible. You could see it, but it was barely visible. It's very difficult to flap your hand that fast. I mean, it's a little bit easier on a camera. But your foot, not so easy to cause a flapping movement. And the ankle and the knee didn't move. The full calves did not move. The ankles did not move that you could see. They were there. the foot flapped. The left foot flapped at such a rate that it went invisible. I could not see the left foot moving at all. It just went invisible. It was moving so fast. And all the while that took place, and the whole thing lasted a couple of minutes, the whole while it took place, there was a buzzing sound, quite loud, in the room, such as a hummingbird's wings flapping. That produces a buzz. A bee buzzes, but that's a different thing, I think. And that phenomena I saw in at least 2 seances. And once you've seen and experienced phenomena like that, well, quite frankly, you've been given the proof, all the proof you need, as you try to emulate it. I spent many a minute, not many really, trying to flap my feet. I don't think. You have a go now yourself. How do you interest an older person for 45 seconds? You get them to try to flap their feet. Have I thus interested you? Well, there we have it then. So, The Land of Mist, a novel. You don't get many novels on spiritualism. And this particular novel, and you can look at it now in a new light, can't you? You can wonder, is it sexist? Is it misogynistic? Or is it a true story of one man's exploration of the most wonderful phenomena that you can get as a human being? Is it one man's exploration of a great truth? That certainly my exploration of spiritualism was the first great truth I unearthed in my life. And once you've unearthed one great truth, and the whole of the propaganda of the materialistic world is destroyed and falls apart, disappears out of your life maybe, then the propaganda that you are subjected to from all kinds of other sources in the modern world, all the advertising, for instance, the story of history you're spoon-fed in school, all of that and more, countless events in the modern world, especially in this new century. From the start of this new century, you can look at great events, and I won't name them, but they're the greatest lie of the century, and you can find the truth behind the lies once you've found one great truth. It opens the door to many, and to me, the great truth that we survive physical death is the biggest lie of all. Sorry, did I say that right? Let me put it another way. The lie is that when you're dead, you're dead. That's the lie. The truth is that we survive physical death. And we live on in another dimension, vibrating at different rates to the physical world. But nevertheless, people who preside in that dimension are alive and well, and easily prove it. Thank you very much for listening.